In the rarefied air of first class, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, a single sharp sound cut through the drone of the engines. It wasn't turbulence. It was the crack of a hand striking flesh. The victim, Dr. Imani Maxwell, a brilliant pediatrician, 6 months pregnant, and a black woman. The assailant, Karen Peterson, a senior flight attendant with a pristine record and a hidden venomous prejudice. Karen believed she was putting an uppity passenger in her place, asserting her authority on the flight. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that the gentle, unassuming woman she had just assaulted was married to the one man who could make the sky fall in on her. The quiet, self-made billionaire who owned the very plane they were on. This is the story of how one ugly act of hatred triggered a storm of consequences, not of simple revenge, but of a karma so precise, so poetic, it could only be real life. The journey was supposed to be a triumphant return for Dr. Imani Maxwell. She had just delivered the keynote address at a pediatric cardiology conference in London, presenting her team's groundbreaking research on non-invasive surgical techniques for newborns. At 34, she was a rising star in her field, respected for her sharp intellect and beloved for her profound empathy. The gentle swell of her belly beneath her elegant but comfortable maternity dress was a constant, joyful reminder of the new life she and her husband, Christopher, were eagerly awaiting. She settled into Seat 2A in the first-class cabin of Sterling Airlines Flight 72, London to New York. The airline was Christopher's pride and joy, a testament to his relentless ambition. He'd built it from a single chartered jet into a global luxury carrier, renowned for its impeccable service. Imani rarely flew first class, preferring the anonymity of business or even premium economy. But Christopher had insisted. "My two most precious people deserve the best," he had texted her that morning, a message that still made her smile. The flight attendant assigned to her section introduced herself with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good afternoon. I'm Karen. Let me know if you need anything at all." Karen Peterson was in her late 40s, with blonde hair pulled into a tight, severe bun and a posture honed by 25 years of service. She was a legacy flight attendant, having been with Sterling since its early days, and she wore her seniority like a shield. From the outset, something felt off. When Imani asked for a bottle of still water and a warm blanket, Karen's response was clipped. "Of course," she said, but her tone suggested it was an imposition. She returned moments later, placing the water on the tray table with a little too much force, causing it to slosh before handing over the blanket without a word. In contrast, when the older white gentleman in Seat 2C asked for a glass of champagne, Karen was a picture of effusive charm. "An excellent choice, Mr. Henderson. Let me get that for you right away. Can I interest you in some warm nuts to accompany it?" Imani noticed, but she dismissed it. She was a black woman who had navigated the predominantly white, male-dominated world of advanced medicine. She was accustomed to the subtle slights, the microaggressions, the assumptions. She had learned to let them roll off her back, choosing to focus on her work, her life, her happiness. She was too full of joy about her baby, too proud of her recent professional success, to let a flight attendant's sour mood bother her. She put on her noise-canceling headphones and opened her tablet, reviewing notes from the conference. An hour into the flight, a bout of mild, unexpected turbulence shook the cabin. It was nothing serious, but it was abrupt enough to jostle Imani's hand, sending the last few ounces of water from her bottle spilling onto the plush gray carpet at her feet. "Oh, goodness," she murmured, reaching for the napkins on her tray. Before she could even begin to clean it up, Karen was there, her face a mask of theatrical fury. "Look at this mess," she snapped, her voice loud enough to turn heads. The warm professional veneer had vanished, replaced by raw condescension. "This is a first-class cabin, not a school cafeteria. This carpeting is custom-loomed wool." Imani looked up, startled by the venom in the woman's tone. "I'm so sorry," she said calmly. "It was the turbulence. It really was an accident." "An accident?" Karen sneered, placing her hands on her hips. "Or just carelessness? Some people just don't know how to behave in a premium environment." The implication hung thick and ugly in the air. Some people like you, people who don't belong here. Mr. Henderson, the gentleman in 2C, lowered his newspaper. "Now hang on a moment," he said, his voice a calm baritone. "There was a jolt. I nearly spilled my own drink. It was clearly an accident." Karen shot him a withering glare before turning her attention back to Imani. "I'll have to get the special cleaning kit. This is going to be a whole process." She spoke as if Imani had deliberately vandalized the aircraft. Imani felt a flash of anger, but she suppressed it, placing a protective hand on her belly. Stress was the last thing she or the baby needed. "I understand," she said, her voice even. "Again, I do apologize for the inconvenience." She expected that to be the end of it. It wasn't. Karen seemed emboldened by Imani's composure, mistaking her grace for weakness. She returned not with a cleaning kit, but with a cheap paper towel, which she tossed onto the damp spot. "Clean it up," she commanded. The cabin fell silent. Mr. Henderson gasped softly. A younger flight attendant, a brunette named Chloe, who was serving the other aisle, froze in her tracks, her eyes wide with disbelief. Imani stared at Karen, her mind struggling to process the sheer audacity. She was a passenger, a pregnant passenger in first class who had had a minor, turbulence-induced spill, and she was being ordered to scrub the floor like a scullery maid. "Excuse me," Imani said, her voice losing its warmth, now edged with steel. "You heard me," Karen said, her chin jutted out. "You made the mess. You can clean it up." "That is absolutely not my responsibility, nor is it appropriate for you to speak to me this way," Imani stated, keeping her voice low but firm. "I am a passenger on this flight. If you have an issue, you can report it, but you will not command me to clean the carpet. Please get your supervisor." Karen laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Honey, on this flight, in this cabin, I am the supervisor. There's no one above me except the captain, and I can assure you, he doesn't want to be bothered with passengers who can't handle their water bottles." The use of the word honey was the final straw. It was dripping with a dismissive, racist condescension that Imani had faced before, but never so overtly, never so publicly. She slowly began to rise from her seat, her hands still on her belly, intending to find Chloe or another crew member to escalate the situation properly. "I am not your honey," she said, her eyes locking with Karen's. "And this conversation is over. I'm going to need your name and employee number. You will be reported for this unprofessional and discriminatory behavior." It was then that Karen Peterson made the single greatest mistake of her life. Fueled by years of resentment, a sense of entitlement, and a deep-seated prejudice that had finally boiled to the surface, she saw Imani's calm defiance as a direct challenge to her authority. In her mind, this woman, this black woman who dared to speak to her with such authority, needed to be put in her place. "You'll report me?" Karen shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "You think you have some kind of power here? You have nothing." And then she swung. Her open palm connected with Imani's cheek with a sickening crack that echoed through the stunned silence of the cabin. The force of it snapped Imani's head to the side. For a split second, there was only the hum of the engines. Then chaos erupted. Imani stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek, not in pain, but in sheer, unadulterated shock. Her other arm wrapped instinctively, protectively, around her pregnant belly. Her mind reeled. She slapped me. A flight attendant just slapped me. Mr. Henderson was on his feet in an instant. "Good God, woman, are you insane? I saw that. Everyone saw that. That is assault." Chloe, the younger flight attendant, rushed forward, her face pale. "Karen, what did you do?" She immediately turned to Imani. "Ma'am, are you all right? Please, sit down." Imani allowed Chloe to guide her back into her seat, her heart pounding against her ribs, a terrifying rhythm that she prayed wasn't affecting the baby. The sting on her cheek was fading, replaced by a cold dread. Karen, however, seemed to double down, her adrenaline surging. "She was threatening me. She was getting aggressive. She was coming at me," she yelled, her voice shrill and panicked, as she realized the gravity of what she'd done. She was already constructing her defense, painting the pregnant doctor as the aggressor. But Imani did not raise her voice. She did not cry. A chilling calm settled over her. The doctor in her took over, assessing the situation with clinical precision. She took a deep breath, then another, focusing on the tiny life inside her. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Chloe," she said, not taking her eyes off the now babbling Karen, Please inform the captain immediately that a passenger has been assaulted by a member of his crew. I require medical attention, not because I am injured, but as a precaution for my unborn child, and I want the authorities to be present upon our arrival at JFK. No exceptions? She did not say who she was. She did not mention her husband's name. She didn't have to. She knew the protocol. She knew the system Christopher had built, and she would let that system, in all its cold, procedural certainty, be the instrument of Karen Peterson's undoing. The storm had broken, and the fallout was just beginning. The remaining 5 hours of the flight passed in a surreal, icy tension. Captain David Reynolds, a veteran pilot with a placid demeanor that belied a will of iron, emerged from the cockpit within minutes of being summoned. His face was a thundercloud as he listened to Chloe's hurried, whispered account just outside the first-class curtain. He approached seat 2A, his eyes immediately assessing Imani. He saw not a hysterical passenger, but a woman of immense composure, one hand on her belly, the other holding a damp napkin to her cheek, where a faint red mark was already blossoming. "Dr. Maxwell?" he asked, his voice low and respectful. He had her name from the passenger manifest. "I am Captain Reynolds. I am told there has been an incident. Are you all right?" "I am shaken, Captain, but I believe I am physically unharmed," Imani replied, her voice steady. "My primary concern is for my baby. The stress of an unprovoked physical assault is not ideal. I need this incident officially logged, and I reiterate my request for law enforcement and airport officials to meet us at the gate." "Of course," Captain Reynolds said without hesitation. He then turned to Mr. Henderson. "Sir, I understand you witnessed this?" "I witnessed the entire thing, Captain," Mr. Henderson affirmed, his voice resonating with the authority of his former life as a federal judge. "It was an appalling, unprovoked attack. Your flight attendant, Ms. Peterson, was aggressive, unprofessional, and ultimately violent. I am more than willing to provide a formal statement to that effect to whomever requires it." The captain nodded grimly. His gaze shifted to Karen, who was standing near the galley, wringing her hands, her face a mixture of defiance and creeping terror. "Ms. Peterson," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was more menacing than any shout, "you will be confined to the crew rest area for the remainder of this flight. You will not interact with any more passengers. You will not speak to any other crew members about this incident. You are officially relieved of your duties pending a full investigation. Am I understood?" Karen opened her mouth to protest, to spin her fabricated tale of being threatened. "But Captain, she was—" "Am I understood?" Captain Reynolds repeated, his voice cutting through her excuses like a razor. Tears of frustration and fear welled in Karen's eyes. "Yes, Captain," she whispered, her career of 25 years dissolving before her eyes. She was escorted away by another crew member, casting one last hateful glare at Imani. Chloe became Imani's designated attendant. She brought her fresh water, a different blanket, and an ice pack wrapped in linen for her cheek. "Dr. Maxwell, I am so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I've never seen anything like that. Karen, she's been difficult lately, stressed, but this is unforgivable." "It's not your fault, Chloe," Imani said, managing a weak smile. "Thank you for your kindness." For the rest of the flight, Imani tried to rest. She closed her eyes but couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the slap, the sharp sound, the shock, the ugliness in Karen's eyes. It wasn't just a physical act. It was an act of violation, of pure, unadulterated hate. She thought of Christopher. Her first instinct after the assault was to use the in-flight Wi-Fi and message him, but she resisted. He would move heaven and earth, disrupt FAA communications, and probably try to have the plane diverted. It would create a scene, and right now she needed calm. He would find out soon enough. The landing would be the beginning of everything. As the plane began its final descent into New York, the familiar chime sounded through the cabin, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our approach to JFK. Cabin crew, please prepare for landing." He paused, then added an unusual addendum. "Due to an onboard incident, we ask that all passengers remain in their seats after the gate is connected. Port Authority officials will be boarding the aircraft. Thank you for your cooperation." A murmur went through the cabin. Karen, sitting in the crew jump seat at the rear of the plane, felt a cold sweat trickle down her back. This was real. This was happening. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, taxiing smoothly toward the terminal. Through her window, Imani could see the flashing blue and red lights of two Port Authority vehicles waiting on the tarmac near their designated gate. Her heart, which had finally settled into a steadier rhythm, began to beat a little faster. The jet bridge connected with a dull thud. The engines spooled down. The fastened seatbelt sign pinged off, but no one moved. An uneasy silence filled the aircraft. Then the main cabin door opened. Two uniformed Port Authority officers stepped inside, followed by a man in a sharp suit, the airport's head of operations. Captain Reynolds met them at the door. "Captain Reynolds?" one officer asked. "Yes, the passenger is in seat 2A. The crew member involved is at the rear jump seat," the captain said, his voice grim. As the officers began to move down the aisle, Imani saw a figure step onto the jet bridge behind them. A tall man with a familiar, powerful stride, his salt and pepper hair cut short, his face set in a mask of controlled fury. It was Christopher Sterling. He wasn't flanked by an entourage. He was alone except for his head of security, a discreet man who remained by the aircraft door. He had clearly been alerted by the captain's mandatory incident report, which would have been flagged straight to the executive level. The name Dr. Imani Maxwell on a report about an assault would have triggered every alarm in the corporation. His eyes scanned the cabin and found Imani immediately. The fury in his expression melted away, replaced by profound concern. He strode directly to her, ignoring everyone else. He knelt by her seat, his hand gently touching her arm, his eyes searching her face. "Imani, my love, are you okay?" he asked, his voice a low rumble meant only for her. "The baby?" "We're okay, Chris," she whispered, a wave of relief washing over her. "Just shaken." He saw the faint red mark on her cheek, and the storm clouds gathered in his eyes again. He kissed her forehead gently. "I'm here now. Everything is going to be all right." At the back of the plane, Karen Peterson watched this exchange, her blood turning to ice water in her veins. She knew who Christopher Sterling was. Every employee of Sterling Airlines knew the face of their founder and owner. She had seen him in corporate videos, in magazines, at the annual employee galas. He was a legend, a phantom who occupied the highest echelons of power, and he was kneeling, whispering lovingly, to the woman she had just slapped. The realization hit her not like a wave, but like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. The woman in 2A, Dr. Imani Maxwell, was Imani Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, the owner's wife. A strangled, guttural sound escaped her lips. The Port Authority officer who had reached her location looked at her, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." Karen's mind short-circuited. The carefully constructed lies, the self-righteous anger, the narrative of her being the victim, it all disintegrated into dust. There was only the horrifying, catastrophic truth. She hadn't just assaulted a passenger. She had assaulted the queen of the kingdom she worked in front of the king himself. Christopher rose to his full height, his calm demeanor returning, but it was a different kind of calm now. It was the calm of absolute power. He nodded to the officers. He turned to Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Christopher Sterling. I understand you witnessed what happened." Mr. Henderson, who had connected the dots the moment Christopher appeared, extended his hand. "I did, Mr. Sterling. It was a disgrace to your airline. But your wife, she handled herself with a grace I have seldom seen." "Thank you," Christopher said, his voice thick with emotion. He then looked towards the back of the plane where Karen was being led away, her face ashen, her eyes wide with a terror that went beyond mere job loss. It was the terror of someone who had not just made a mistake, but had committed an act of self-immolation. Christopher helped Imani to her feet. "Let's go home," he said softly. As they walked toward the door, they passed the other passengers, who now stared with a mixture of awe and understanding. The drama that had unfolded was far bigger than they had imagined. Stepping onto the jet bridge, Christopher paused and turned to his head of operations, who had been standing by silently. "Robert," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, "fire her immediately. Have her credentials and access revoked before she even leaves the airport. I want her security escorted off the premises, and make sure our legal team cooperates fully with the district attorney's office. We will be pressing charges to the fullest extent of the law." There was no appeal. There was no discussion. It was a command, delivered with the chilling finality of a guillotine. Karen Peterson's career wasn't just over. It had been erased. But for her, the real karma had only just begun its long, cold descent. The initial fallout was not merely a consequence. It was a demolition. For Karen Peterson, the walk from the aircraft to the terminal's sterile back rooms was a journey through the 9 circles of her own personal hell. Flanked by 2 impassive Port Authority officers, she was acutely aware of the stares, from the ground crew on the tarmac, from the gate agents who averted their eyes, from the other airport employees who whispered behind their hands. The scarlet letter of her transgression was invisible, but felt as if it were branded on her forehead. In a windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, the process was swift and brutally impersonal. A Sterling Airlines operations manager, a man she'd known for a decade, refused to meet her gaze as he slid a form across the table. Her employment was terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct. Her airline ID, the plastic card that had given her access to a world of travel and status for 25 years, was confiscated. Her security pass was deactivated. She was instructed to gather her personal belongings from her locker under escort, and was then led out a side exit to the curb, a place reserved for garbage trucks and forgotten luggage. The thud of the heavy steel door closing behind her was the sound of her entire world ending. The first 48 hours passed in a blur of disbelief and rising panic. In her meticulously clean Queen's apartment, which suddenly felt like a mausoleum, Karen paced relentlessly. She replayed the incident on an endless loop in her mind, but the script changed with each retelling. In her version, Imani Maxwell was not a calm, pregnant doctor, but a shrewish, entitled woman who had sneered at her. The spilled water was not an accident, but a deliberate act of disrespect. Imani's firm request for her name was not a standard complaint, but a menacing threat. The slap in this fractured, internal narrative was a preemptive act of self-defense. She had been afraid. She was the victim. She clung to this version of events with the desperation of a drowning woman clinging to a shard of wreckage. This self-deception was her only shield against the terrifying reality. Her phone, once a constant buzz of crew, scheduling updates and gossipy texts from colleagues, fell silent. She reached out to her closest friends, fellow senior attendants she'd shared layovers with in Paris and Hong Kong. Her first call went to voicemail. Her text to another was answered hours later with a curt, "Karen, I can't talk about this." A third friend simply blocked her number. The institutional shunning was absolute. She was radioactive, and no one at Sterling Airlines was willing to risk their career by showing sympathy for the woman who had assaulted the owner's wife. The isolation was a physical weight, pressing down on her, suffocating her. While Karen's world shrank to the 4 walls of her apartment, Christopher Sterling was expanding the battlefield. He had convened an emergency meeting of the Sterling Airlines Executive Board at 6 a.m. the morning after the flight. In the sleek top-floor boardroom overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the mood was funereal. The PR team, led by a slick crisis manager, argued for containment. They suggested issuing a formal apology, offering a substantial private settlement to Dr. Maxwell, a suggestion that made Christopher's jaw tighten, and firing Karen Peterson quietly to avoid further publicity. "We need to control the narrative," the PR head argued. "We frame this as an isolated incident, a troubled employee, and we move on." Christopher, who had been listening silently at the head of the table, slammed his hand down, the sound echoing off the glass and steel. "No," he said, his voice a low growl that silenced the room. "That's the coward's way out. That is sweeping dirt under a rug that is already filthy." He stood and began to pace, not with agitation, but with the focused energy of a predator. "Do you think this is the first time an employee has been racist on one of our flights? The first time a passenger of color has been treated with disrespect? This is not an isolated incident. This is a symptom of a disease. Ms. Peterson was just the one brazen enough to let the mask slip completely, and she did it to my wife. What about the thousands of others who suffer the small slights, the microaggressions, the quiet moments of disrespect that don't end in assault and therefore never get reported?" He stopped and looked at each board member. This isn't just about Imani. This is about the integrity of the name on the side of our planes. We don't hide from this. We don't contain it. We confront it. We will be transparent. We will be accountable. We will tear down our training programs and rebuild them. We will use this disgusting incident as a catalyst to become the single most inclusive and actively anti-prejudiced airline in the world. Anything less is a betrayal of every passenger we serve. His speech left no room for argument. He personally greenlit a press release that was stark in its honesty, and he sat for a single, lengthy interview with a respected national journalist known for her tough but fair reporting. In the interview, he never once raised his voice. He detailed the incident with clinical precision and profound disappointment. He announced the immediate overhaul of company policy, the hiring of a leading DEI firm, and the establishment of an independent ethics committee. He turned a story of personal injury into a public pledge for systemic reform. The headlines shifted overnight from scandalous gossip to a serious discussion of corporate responsibility. Christopher Sterling wasn't just defending his wife, he was redefining his company. For Karen, watching the interview on television was a surreal experience. This powerful, handsome billionaire wasn't ranting about her. He was using her as a case study in failure, a footnote in his grand new vision. The complete lack of personal vindictiveness was somehow more damning than any public tirade would have been. Desperate and with her savings rapidly depleting, she found a lifeline, or so she thought. A lawyer named Leo Nash, a man whose billboards promised huge cash settlements and whose tailored suits were a little too shiny, saw an opportunity. He listened to Karen's warped version of events and saw a winning narrative for the court of public opinion. "This is perfect," Nash said, leaning back in his faux leather chair. "David and Goliath, the hard-working flight attendant of 25 years versus the vindictive billionaire and his spoiled wife. We don't fight them in the courtroom. We fight them on cable news. We'll file a wrongful termination suit so big it'll make their eyes water." He coached her, molded her story, taught her when to cry, when to look indignant. He booked her on a primetime opinion show hosted by a contrarian anchor who loved to attack the elite. In front of millions, Karen Peterson, her face artfully tear-streaked, gave the performance of her life. "I was in fear for my safety," she said, her voice trembling convincingly. "Mrs. Sterling," she was irate about the spilled water. "She got in my face, threatening my job. When she stood up so aggressively, I reacted. I was defending myself. And now her husband, with all his money and all his power, has destroyed my life to cover it up. They are trying to crush the little person." For a few days it worked. The show's rabid fan base rallied around her. The hashtag Josh and Justice for Karen trended, fueled by conspiracy theorists and anti-corporate blogs. Donations trickled into a legal defense fund set up by Nash. For the first time in weeks, Karen felt a sliver of hope. She wasn't just Karen Peterson, the disgraced flight attendant. She was a cause célèbre. The Sterling legal team's response was silent but surgical. They initiated the discovery process for the wrongful termination suit. As Leo Nash grandstanded in the press, Christopher's lawyers were quietly issuing subpoenas and interviewing every passenger from Flight 72. That's when they found Alex Chen, a 28-year-old tech founder from Palo Alto, who was sitting in seat 3A. Chen had a habit of recording everything, and when he'd heard the argument start, he discreetly pointed his new phone's high-resolution camera toward the aisle. When he saw Karen's interview on the news, he was disgusted by the lies and immediately contacted Sterling's legal department. The deposition was held in a sterile conference room on the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper. Leo Nash was in his element, joking with the stenographer, posturing for his client. He felt confident. Then Sterling's lead attorney, a quiet, formidable woman named Ms. Davies, simply said, "We would like to enter into evidence item 1, a video file from the phone of passenger Alex Chen." She nodded to an assistant who dimmed the lights and played the video on a large screen. The clip was only 34 seconds long, but it was an eternity. It showed everything. The calm, seated posture of Imani, the towering, aggressive stance of Karen. The sound was crystal clear. Karen's condescending tone, her command to clean it up. Imani's firm but measured response. Then the undeniable visual of Imani beginning to rise slowly, and Karen, unprovoked, swinging her hand and striking her. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. Karen stared at the blank screen, her mouth agape. The objective, irrefutable truth had just played out before her eyes, stripping away every lie she had told herself and the world. She saw her own face, ugly with a rage she didn't recognize, and she felt a wave of nausea. Leo Nash's confident smirk had evaporated. He looked like a man who had just watched his prize racehorse collapse 10 feet from the finish line. He shuffled his papers, cleared his throat, and couldn't form a sentence. The case was not just lost, it was vaporized. The lawsuit was dropped that afternoon. Ms. Davies, as a professional courtesy, agreed not to release the video to the press, but she made it clear it would be turned over to the district attorney for the criminal assault case. The public humiliation was complete. Karen Peterson was now not just an assailant, but a proven public liar. Her legal fund was drained by Nash's fees. She was forced to sell her apartment to cover her debts and moved into a bleak third-floor walk-up, where the smell of boiled cabbage from next door was a constant companion. She was broke, unemployable, and alone, save for her sister Sarah and her bright, bubbly 10-year-old niece Lily, who was the one untarnished source of joy in her life. She hit a bottom so deep she couldn't imagine a way out. But karma, she was about to learn, was not just a force of destruction, it was an architect. And it was in the process of building her a prison so perfect, so personal, that escape would be impossible. One cold Tuesday morning, the phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice fractured with panic. "It's Lily," she sobbed. "She collapsed at school. Karen, they don't know what's wrong with her heart. They're saying it's serious, really serious." That call was the beginning of the final act. For 2 agonizing weeks, Karen and her sister haunted hospital corridors, their hope dwindling with every inconclusive test. Finally, a specialist from a larger hospital identified the issue. It was a condition so rare it sounded like a Latin curse: anomalous left coronary artery from the pulmonary artery. Al Kappa, a congenital time bomb in Lily's chest that had been ticking since birth. She needed a complex, dangerous surgery, immediately. The local cardiologist was blunt. "There are maybe 5 people on the planet I'd trust with this. The best, the very best, is right here in New York. She pioneered the technique for this specific repair in older children. If anyone can save your daughter, she can." Sarah, her hands trembling, looked at the referral note. "What's her name?" she asked, her voice a whisper of hope. The cardiologist looked at his screen. "Maxwell, Dr. Imani Maxwell, at New York Children's." The name dropped into the silence of the room like a stone into a deep well. Karen felt the air leave her body. Her vision tunneled. It couldn't be. The universe couldn't be that cruel, that precise. The woman whose reputation she had tried to ruin, whose face she had struck, whose very humanity she had denied, was the only person in the world who could save the one person she truly loved. She was trapped. Not by a lawsuit, not by a news report, but by a twist of fate so exquisitely painful, it felt like the hand of God itself had reached down to personally deliver her sentence. The name Dr. Imani Maxwell did not just hang in the sterile air of the cardiologist's office. It detonated. For Karen's sister Sarah, it was a beacon of hope, a tangible name to cling to in a maelstrom of fear. For Karen, it was the sound of a cosmic trap springing shut. The floor seemed to vanish from beneath her feet, replaced by a dizzying abyss of her own making. "That's great news, right?" Sarah said, grabbing Karen's arm, her face awash with desperate relief. "The best doctor in the world is right here. We have to call her. We have to get Lily to her." Karen couldn't speak. Her throat had constricted into a knot of pure terror. How could she explain? How could she possibly articulate to her frantic sister that the savior they desperately needed was the woman Karen had assaulted, publicly slandered, and tried to sue? How could she say, "I'm sorry, Sarah, but I might have ruined our only chance because I was a hateful bigot on a transatlantic flight"? "Karen?" Sarah prompted, her hopeful expression beginning to curdle with confusion at Karen's ashen face. "What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." I know her," Karen stammered, the words tasting like ash. "From the airline. She's the wife of the owner." It was a pathetic half-truth, but it was all she could manage. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Oh, well, that's a coincidence. Is that a problem? It might be, Karen mumbled, her mind racing. We didn't part on the best of terms. This was the understatement of a lifetime, a grotesque caricature of the truth. The following days were a slow-motion nightmare. While Sarah, fueled by a mother's fierce determination, navigated the hospital bureaucracy to have Lily's case referred, Karen descended into a new layer of hell. Sleep offered no escape, as her dreams were haunted by the 34-second video from the deposition. She saw her own sneering face, heard her own hateful words over and over. Then the dream would shift, and she would be in a vast, dark operating theater, watching from behind glass as Dr. Maxwell, her face obscured by a surgical mask, held a tiny beating heart in her hands. Lily's heart. And then the doctor would look up, her eyes locking with Karen's, and the heart in her hands would stop. Karen would wake up gasping, her body drenched in a cold sweat. She had to confess. The lie was too heavy to carry. The night before the scheduled consultation, she sat with Sarah in the grim hospital cafeteria. "There's more to it," Karen whispered, her voice hoarse. She proceeded to tell a heavily sanitized version of the story, painting it as a terrible misunderstanding and a major argument where she had lost her temper. She omitted the racism, the lawsuit, the public lies. Even in her confession, she was a coward. Sarah listened, her expression hardening. "You had an argument with the one doctor who can save my daughter's life? Karen, what did you do?" "I was fired for it," Karen admitted, the shame burning her from the inside out. "It was bad, Sarah. Really bad." Sarah buried her face in her hands. "Then what are we going to do? Should we cancel? Will she even see us?" "We have to go," Karen said, a strange fatalistic calm settling over her. "We don't have another choice. We have to walk in there and pray." The journey to the New York Children's Hospital the following Monday was surreal. Karen saw the city not as the vibrant metropolis she had once felt part of, but as a hostile landscape of her own failures. Every Sterling Airlines billboard seemed to mock her. The hospital itself was an architectural marvel of glass and light, a testament to hope and healing. The lobby featured a large donor wall, and Karen's eyes immediately found the name, engraved in gleaming silver, the Christopher and Dr. Imani Maxwell Sterling Foundation. They had helped build this temple of compassion, and Karen was about to defile it with her presence. The pediatric cardiology wing was painted in cheerful pastels, a stark contrast to the gray gloom of Karen's soul. She felt like a wraith haunting a child's birthday party. When a nurse called Lily Peterson, Karen's heart hammered against her ribs. She followed Sarah and Lily into a consultation room, her feet like lead. The room was bright and clean. Lily, small and pale, sat on the examination table, clutching a worn teddy bear. Sarah chattered nervously, trying to fill the oppressive silence. Karen sank into a chair in the corner, trying to make herself as small as possible, wishing she could simply dematerialize. Then the door opened. Dr. Imani Maxwell entered, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. She was a figure of quiet, commanding authority. Her white coat was immaculate, and the proud curve of her advanced pregnancy was a powerful symbol of life and creation. She carried a tablet in one hand, her expression one of professional warmth. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and melodic. "I'm Dr. Maxwell, and you must be Lily. I've heard a lot about you." Her smile was directed entirely at the child, instantly putting Lily at ease. She then turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Peterson, I presume?" "It's Sarah. Please," Sarah said, shaking her hand with fervent gratitude. And then, Imani's gaze drifted past Sarah and landed on the figure hunched in the corner. For a single breathtaking second, the professional facade wavered. It was almost imperceptible. A slight widening of her eyes, a fractional intake of breath, a tightening around her mouth. It was the look of a soldier seeing the face of a bitter enemy in an unexpected truce zone. The memory of the flight, the shock, the humiliation, the searing sting on her cheek, the primal fear for her unborn child, flashed behind her eyes. Then just as quickly, it was gone. A mask of impenetrable professionalism descended. She gave no outward sign of recognition. To Karen, that fleeting moment was an eternity. She saw that she was not forgotten. She was recognized and she was remembered. What followed was the most excruciating 30 minutes of Karen's life. Dr. Maxwell conducted the consultation with a brilliance that was both dazzling and terrifying. Her focus was absolute. She spoke to Lily with gentle humor, making the examination feel like a game. She explained the intricacies of the Al Kappa condition to Sarah with stunning clarity, using the tablet to show 3D models of the heart, her hands moving with the easy confidence of a master artisan. Throughout it all, she never once looked at Karen. She did not acknowledge her presence. She directed questions to Sarah and Lily's mother. Karen Peterson, the woman, the aunt, simply did not exist in that room. It was a punishment more profound than any verbal condemnation. She was being erased, rendered utterly irrelevant in the presence of the woman whose existence she herself had tried to negate. She was a ghost at a life-or-death meeting, a non-entity whose only role was to bear silent witness to the grace and skill of the person she had wronged. The procedure is called coronary artery translocation, Imani concluded, looking directly at Sarah. It's a delicate and lengthy operation, but Lily is a strong candidate, and her prognosis is excellent. I have a cancellation in my surgical schedule for this Thursday. I want to admit her tomorrow to begin preoperative conditioning. Sarah erupted into gut-wrenching sobs of relief, grabbing Imani's hand. "Thank you," she wept. "Oh God, doctor, thank you." Imani gave her hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze. "It is my honor to care for your daughter." As Imani turned to leave, a primal scream of desperation clawed its way up Karen's throat. It was now or never. To remain silent was to be complicit in a lie too monstrous to bear. "Dr. Maxwell." The voice that came out was a broken, unrecognizable croak. Imani stopped at the door but did not turn. Her posture stiffened. Karen staggered to her feet, her body shaking uncontrollably. All the rehearsed apologies, the sanitized versions of the story, evaporated. All that was left was the raw, ugly, horrifying truth. I have to," she began, the words catching in her throat like burrs. "On the plane, Sterling Flight 72. It was me." Tears she hadn't known were there began to stream down her face, hot and shameful. "What I did to you, there is no word for it. There is no excuse. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was hateful. It was ugly. It was poison. And I am so sorry. I am so ashamed I can barely breathe." She looked at her niece, then back at Imani's unmoving back. "I saw the video. At the deposition. I saw my face. I know what I am. You don't have to do this. You shouldn't have to look at me, let alone save my family. I swear to you, I will not hold it against you. I will understand. I will take her away right now. We'll find someone else. We'll go to another country. I cannot ask this of you." The room was deathly quiet, save for Karen's ragged sobs. Finally, slowly, Imani turned around. Her face was not angry. It was not smug. It was etched with a profound, weary gravity. She looked at the pathetic, weeping woman before her, and then her gaze softened as it settled on Lily, who was watching the exchange with wide, fearful eyes. "Ms. Peterson," Imani began, her voice low but carrying an immense weight that filled the entire room. "You are correct. There is no excuse for what you did. It was an act of profound prejudice, an attempt to dehumanize me for no reason other than the color of my skin while I was carrying my child. That is a truth you must carry for the rest of your life. The consequences you have faced are yours and yours alone to bear." Each word was a precise, surgical incision into Karen's soul, laying the truth bare. "However," Imani continued, taking a step back toward the center of the room, her presence dominating it completely, "you are mistaken about something else. This," she said, gesturing to the room, the hospital, the sleeping form of Lily, "is not about you. From the moment I walked through that door, this ceased to be about you or me or that airplane. In this hospital, I am not a passenger you assaulted. I am not Christopher Sterling's wife. I am Dr. Imani Maxwell, Director of Pediatric Cardiac Surgery, and my only allegiance, my only sacred duty, is to the patient on that table." She locked her eyes onto Karen's, and for the first time Karen saw not a victim, but a woman of terrifyingly powerful integrity. I will not allow a child's heart to fail because of the hatred in her aunts. I will take Lily into my operating room on Thursday morning, and I will give her the absolute best of my skill, my focus, and my care. I will do this because that is the oath I took, and that is the woman I am. Your apology is noted. Your permission is irrelevant. She paused, letting the finality of her declaration settle. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a surgery to prepare for, a life to save. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a silence broken only by the sound of Karen Peterson collapsing back into her chair, completely and utterly shattered. Not by anger or revenge, but by a tidal wave of grace so immense it had washed her clean, whether she deserved it or not. Later that evening, Christopher Sterling found Imani in her hospital office, staring out the window at the city lights. He had received a security alert the moment the Peterson name had been officially entered into his wife's surgical schedule. "Imani," he said softly, closing the door behind him, "I know who your patient is. You don't have to do this. This is too much to ask. I can have the best surgeon from the Mayo Clinic on a plane tonight. I can have a team from London here by morning. Just say the word." Imani turned from the window, a small, tired smile on her lips. She placed a hand on her belly. "That woman stood over me, Chris, and in her eyes I was nothing, an animal who didn't belong in her space. She tried to take my dignity, to harm me, to harm this baby, all because of hate." She walked over to him and took his hands. "If I turn her away, if I let another doctor handle it because I can't bear to be in the same room as her, then her hate wins. It will have reached across time and scarred me so deeply that I can no longer do my job. It will have made me less of a doctor. The only way I can truly win, the only way to truly close this chapter, is to treat her niece with the same skill and compassion I would give to any other child. It's not for her, Chris. It's for me. It's my final answer to her hate." Christopher looked at the woman he loved, at her fierce, unbreakable spirit. His power could move planes and markets and fortunes. Her power could mend a broken heart in more ways than one. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, overwhelmed with an admiration that eclipsed all his other worldly successes. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." The reckoning was over. The healing was about to begin. The surgery was a success. Dr. Imani Maxwell, with hands guided by years of training and a profound sense of duty, meticulously repaired the tiny, malformed artery in Lily's heart. In the waiting room, Karen Peterson prayed not to God, but to the woman she had wronged, a silent, desperate plea across the sterile expanse of the hospital. When Imani emerged from the OR hours later, exhausted but triumphant, she delivered the good news to a grateful, weeping family. She accepted their thanks with professional grace and left the account between her and Karen finally mercifully closed. Karen Peterson never saw Imani again. She pleaded guilty to the assault charge and received a sentence of community service and mandatory anti-bias counseling. She eventually found work as a clerk in a warehouse, a world away from the skies she once ruled. The karma that found her wasn't just about losing her job or her reputation. The ultimate consequence was being forced to confront her own humanity by witnessing the profound grace of the person she had tried to dehumanize. She had to be saved by the very woman she believed was beneath her. That is a lesson that changes a person from the inside out. Imani and Christopher welcomed a healthy baby boy a few months later. Sterling Airlines became a model for corporate change. Its new training program, the Maxwell Initiative, lauded as the industry standard. This story isn't just about a slap on a plane. It's a powerful testament to the fact that our worst actions can lead us to moments that demand our best character. It's a reminder that true power isn't about wealth or status, but about integrity, grace, and the quiet courage to be kind in the face of ugliness. What did you think of Imani's decision? Would you have been able to do the same? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more incredible, true life stories of karma and redemption. Thank you for listening.